Councillor Garner just wants to say very briefly a few words in relation to the incident at Roughmute. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Cecil. I'd just like to pass on my condolences to the family of Mr. Sharp, who sadly passed away at the weekend after an incident at Roughmute, as you said. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the team at Roughmute, who acted in a excellent manner during the incident, and in particular John Kirkholm, who assisted me during the first aid we were carrying out on Mr. Sharp while waiting on the paramedics to arrive. I just would like to pass on my sincere condolences to the family and to say thank the team.
I think we would all share in that. It must have been quite distressing for Mr. Sharp and indeed the staff at Roughmute, and we do share in condolences and passing that on from all the members of the executive, indeed the council, following that very unfortunate incident. Just to make clear, it was no incident was in relation to any malfunction or accident within the actual centre itself. Mr. Sharp took ill and while exiting Roughmute, and that was the reason behind it. But it's a difficult time for the family at any time losing someone, but in those circumstances at this time, it's obviously going to be magnified. Okay, thank you. Moving on to this morning's meeting, we don't have any apologies. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Move to item 3, which is the minute of the emergency executive held on the 11th of June.
Agreed.
I agree it's a true record.
Agreed.
Okay. Is there anything that is not covered in the agenda that the MD requires any update in relation to? No. Okay, thank you. Move to item 4, which is the strategic plans and vision framework and consultation feedback. And I'm going to ask Kenneth, the Chief Exec, to speak to the report.
So the purpose of this report is to update the emergency executive in relation to the engagement workshops which we had last week with elected members, and then to agree the vision framework as a basis for progressing the council's corporate plan and 5-year business plan. Members will report at the previous meeting of this committee on the 11th of June, which outlined a way forward for the council's key strategic plans and set out a proposal for elected member consultation. It was recognised that in the very constrained and challenging financial environment, particularly in view of the impact of COVID-19, there's an urgent need to consider council priorities, not just for the recovery phase, but more broadly in terms of the corporate plan and the business plan. The report sets out the schematic which we had in the previous report that sets out the link between the strategic plans and the recovery framework. So we had 3 elected member workshops last week on the 16th of June, which provided an opportunity to reflect and comment on both the short-term priorities in the context of recovery and the longer-term issues which were of importance to your communities. And a total of 20 elected members participated. As I say, they're held on a locality basis, and they were framed around the 5 questions which are set out in the report at paragraph 3.4. I felt it was a useful and a positive exercise. In broad terms, there was general agreement that the priorities set out were largely reflective of what the council needed to focus on. But there were quite a lot of common themes that emerged in the discussion across the 3 workshops. And a summary of these is set out at the table below paragraph 4.1. And the areas of focus were a number of members commented on the importance of issues was certainly about our relationship with communities post-COVID-19, a focus on participatory budgeting, the impacts in relation to poverty, including food poverty, and challenges around tackling disease, the importance of access to digital devices and networks, the importance of reopening schools, not least to enable parents and carers to return to their employment, the challenges for young people and the need for them to be supported in terms of employment and opportunity, issues around mental and physical well-being, which I think are familiar to all of us, the importance of the Council supporting businesses to get back on track, and particularly small businesses, issues around housing allocations and repairs, climate change, and I think more broadly, the importance of a one council approach, breaking down silos and barriers, showing leadership, tackling bureaucracy, and operating at pace. And a sense that there had been progress made on that during the lockdown, and we needed to capitalise on that as we move forward. So we highlighted a number of key issues and actions which will be incorporated into the work we take forward. An updated copy of the vision framework is attached at Appendix 1 as a basis for progressing the corporate plan and the 5-year business plan. Never more like the beginning of a process rather than its conclusion. So the proposal is that the work on the corporate and business plans will be taken forward over the coming months, and that will be reported. These will be reported to the Council in September of this year. And that will build on the work to date and allow for more detailed work on what we call the strategic deliverables, which are set out in the vision framework. That will allow for elected members and officers to have a further opportunity to reflect on what has been proposed and ensure that that meets the needs of our communities, customers, and the businesses we serve. It will allow for community engagement and the necessary work in ensuring that what's set out is considered in the context of the equalities issues that we need to have due consideration of. We'll need to move to more tangible and quantifiable actions with timescales, align these to the recovery plans, resource allocation, and our Council of the Future projects. And whilst the vision framework provides a platform for all of that, and in our next report, we will of course be considering the financial overview, I think it's also right at this point to emphasise the significant risks that the Council faces in relation to its financial position. It is likely that very substantial savings proposals will need to be agreed and implemented both year budget. And the vision framework provides a basis for tackling these challenges, with the clear implication that non-priority areas will need to be a focus for savings, and that service transformation to allow for the development of new lower cost models of delivery will be required across the Council. So in conclusion, the setting of clear Council priorities and strategies is critical to having a joined up approach to our communities and businesses revitalising Falkirk in the wake of COVID-19, whilst ensuring that our budget challenges are addressed in a robust and planned way. And the vision framework, we're seeking approval of that as a basis for progressing that important work over the next few months, and specifically acting as a basis for the corporate plan and the 5-year business plan, which we will come back to members with at the September Council meeting. I'm happy to take any questions on that, Convener.
Thank you, Kenneth, and I just want to say thank you for to all the members who participated within the workshop, and I know that a few that weren't able to attend did provide some written comments, and I also hope that people can see their views reflected in the vision framework, because I think that's important. And that is, it's going to be a dynamic document that will inform the corporate plan and indeed therefore the business plans going forward. I think it was a good piece of work, and once it's been further refined and as part of a bigger piece of engagement, our communities will also have the ability to comment on it. However, at this time, we do need to have a set of clear priorities to be able to work towards in the short to medium term going forward. And as Kenneth indicated, this is part of what this will be used for to help us in our further budget deliberations later towards the autumn. So I'm not going to say too much more on this particular report right now, but I'm happy to move the report as per the recommendations, and that allows it to move forward to the next stage. And we'll open it up to others. Councillor Garner.
Be happy to second, reserving the right if need.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bissett.
Hi, thanks, convener. It makes sense to include the recovery plan as part of the overall corporate plan, Council of the Future. You know, let's get all these pulled together, you know, medium-term financial plan. So it makes sense, and we've discussed it, and we've had these workshops, so I think everybody's quite aware of it. So I would just like to ask on page 14, 4.3, bullet point 2, allow for community engagement and to assess the impact of the strategic deliverables in relation to poverty and inequalities. Now, given that there's a report to come back to the Council in September, and given that we're going to have a consultation on SPR, so are we combining a consultation on SPR with a consultation on this with the communities, and when would we plan to do this consultation with communities? Thank you.
Kenneth,
thank you.
a bit more around that.
Yes, thank you, convener. And what I don't have, or I'm not suggesting today, is a precise time plan. I think that we need to re-engage with members to get this to the next stage. And in the budget report that follows, there's reference to the potential for a member workshop, which could bring together both the considerations of the vision and the next steps, and also the budget implications and issues associated with that. I think the point is that the need for consultation with communities is really important, because clearly our communities have gone through a very challenging and difficult time in relation to COVID-19, and I think in considering our priorities as a council, there's a need to share that and engage before finalising our priorities going forward. And engagement is also going to be important in the context of the budget process. So I think there's an issue and there's a challenge for us, and this is referenced in the report, to bring together this work in relation to the corporate business plan and also the budget, and consider the consultation in that broader context. Just on the matter of SPR, we had the workshops on that this week. We'll be reporting back to the Emergency Executive or Council. That will be later in the year. So I do see that consultation with communities on SPR being separate from the one on the corporate priorities and vision, because that is much more about specific facilities in local communities. So I think these two aspects of it will be separate.
Thank you. Can I come back in, convener, just to say that there's also a consultation or a chat with communities on participatory budgeting to take place as well. So there's quite a number of consultations to take place with communities. So I guess it's kind of getting the right timescale for them. So have we any idea when the participatory budgeting might kick off? When we're planning to get moving on that?
Robert, I understand that we're awaiting guidance and feedback from COSLA. That was due fairly close to when close down happened, and I don't think it has been back through the process yet. Stuart, have you got any further information in relation to that?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. You're absolutely right. Prior to COVID breakout, we were expecting some national guidance from COSLA. We also had we're starting to develop a framework ourselves. I think that our thoughts were around using some of the PB money as part of the outcome of the consultation on the SPR, to use some money to improve facilities that communities found value in. And I think we're also thinking that we'll use PB money to align with the priorities that communities come back to us with from the consultation engagement exercise that we're going to do in terms of the priorities coming out of the straw man workshops.
Okay. Councillor Bissett, are you content with that?
I'm happy with that, Convener. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other member that wants to ask questions or comment? Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Convener. On behalf of our group, just our thoughts are with the families, gentlemen who passed away at Roughmute. I would have liked to have had an update before this as a group. Know the details, but actually knowing what happened. But our thoughts are with the family. Regarding the report, Convener, as long as the elected members are kept in the loop, as their input is key. What was highlighted at the workshop that I was involved in, it highlighted different areas of different needs. I meant to make sure that we involve the correct groups in all these consultations, so that the benefits of what we're trying to do gets to the heart of the communities. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you. I think in relation to the Roughmute, we had to be very sensitive because the gentleman was very ill at the time, and be sensitive to the families. We also didn't have all the correct details, and that had to be facilitated through other agencies. But Councillor Garner has now been able to be in touch with the family, and will ensure that the thoughts are passed on to everyone there. Okay, is there any other comment? Are we content to approve the report? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, move on to item 5, which is the financial overview. I appreciate this was a very detailed and complex report, and I think, as you will hear from Mr. Smale, that at the time of writing it was as accurate as it could be, but as was always the caveat with this, that things have changed just over the last week, and as a result, I think we need to actually take stock and have a bit more work on this. But I'll ask Mr. Smale to present the report, and then we can open up the discussion.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. The report's in 4 sections, structured in 4 sections. And just to give you an initial overview, so the first part is somewhat rear view mirror, looking at the outturn for 1920 subject to audit. We then move on to what's, I would suggest, the main part of the report, the current financial year and the particular pressures and COVID-driven pressures that we're facing. We then have a look at the range of business support grants that have been administered on behalf of the government, and conclude with casting an eye forward in the not too distant future, it must be said, to preparation for the 21-22 budget. If I just work through the report in the order that it's before you, and if I just touch on recommendations at the outset, and just draw your attention to a couple in particular. The first is at 212, where there's reference on the back of the unprecedented financial picture that there's a suggestion of a special members workshop to focus in on that. And just also in 2.2, which we'll come to as we go through the report, particular savings proposals that would require member approval were they to be accepted. So in terms of the four-part structure, if I focus firstly and briefly on the provisional outturn, I think there's two main points to draw from that. The first is that, albeit there are inevitably some ebbs and flows, the position reported in January overall is how we've turned out. There has been some movement, but in pro rata terms, not significant. Of course, this is all subject to audit. And flowing from that, importantly, the level of reserves that we're sitting with at the close of the financial year just passed, and in consequence our opening balance for the current year of 9.5 million. That would be, in normal circumstances, a very healthy position, but we're not, and far from it, in normal circumstances. And more is said on that later in the report, and I'll pick that up. So skipping on to the next section, and as I suggest, really the main section of the report, which is a focus on the current financial year. And bearing in mind we're still in the first quarter of the current financial year, so in many respects the position is inherently somewhat premature. We've identified 5 main threats or risks to the Council's financial position, and these will be consistent across councils. And they're set out at 3.2.2. The subsequent paragraphs takes each of these in turn and gives a little bit of an explanation and narrative around what the setting is, and ultimately leads to a estimate of the financial impact, a heavily caveated, I would highlight, estimate of the position. If we just skip forward to 3.2.4, para 3.2.4, you can see there at the time the report was written what the government grant support position is. But since then, things have moved on, at least twofold. We've got the additional 27 million school, no, it's not just school meals, it's for general community meals as well, 27 million for that that's been announced, and also significant changes in the logistics of school return with some funding over 2 years to support that. And I think this just illustrates what will be a recurrent point. This is a constantly moving picture, and all the variables in the equation, in the mix, will ebb and flow. So this is an early attempt, taking things as they are, but the position will move constantly as we go through the financial year. So I think that's just something to be well aware of and alert to. If we skip on to para 3220, where there's another table, and that sets out the elements of additional cost estimated over the course of the year. And this feeds into a wide exercise that all councils have been asked to do by COSLA. And that will be assimilated, aggregated, and inevitably feed into the engagement with Scottish Government on funding. I would just draw your attention in the top half of that table, the last line there, where there's a allocation of early years funding, the 2.4 million, within children's services. It's relating to and being applied against children's services, or primarily education services costs. And that's a flexibility that's been agreed by the Scottish Government, and the subsequent paragraph 3221 following the table sets out a bit more of an explanation as to how that plays in. But we're harnessing there reasonably and legitimately Scottish Government flexibility that has been given to all councils. The next section I would draw your attention to, and again, it's another table at 3222, just a few paragraphs on, which relates to the position, important element in the mix of budget savings. Clearly, I've set out in the top part of the table a number of the savings agreed in February due to COVID-related pressures are compromised and under threat. So that's a part of the HIP. The subsequent parts of the table integrate mitigating elements that dampen that particular hit. And in particular, I would draw your attention to the last part of the table, where you'll see in bold a subheading, savings requiring members' approval. And perhaps in particular, I would draw your attention to the pest control services, noting that there is a specific report as mandated back at the February budget meeting on that particular issue, and that will be considered by you as the next item on the agenda. So if we pan forward to 3245, which takes all those risks or financial threats and aggregates them to give an overall position. Again, I would emphasize every variable in that mix, in that table needs to be caveated. The numbers will change, as I've already outlined. The very first line in terms of government funding has already changed, and all those figures will oscillate during the course of the year. But I think the key point is less than the spurious accuracy of 14,187,000. It's more the scale, the magnitude, the quantum of the sum. And if that was 10 million, or if it was half it, 7 million, that would still be a huge number to be addressed, with significant implications for the decisions that would need to be taken to address and redress that situation. These are unique circumstances, and because of the unique circumstances, possible solutions are being mooted that hitherto wouldn't have seen the light of day. And there are a range, 3 or 4, what might be categorised as fiscal flexibilities that are now being mooted and are being engaged with, both with Audit Scotland and the Scottish Government. And ultimately, for some of them, it would need UK Treasury approval. I'll mention 2, and probably the 2 most significant. One is to allow the deferral of meeting the inevitable deficit in the current year over a number of years, up to 20 years is being talked about. And that's significant because as legislation stands, when you come to set your council tax for next year, which isn't going to be too far away, you need to factor into that any deficit that you are needing to cover in the current year. So in terms of decisions here, whatever's not done to act in the current year, in practice is only going to be deferred for a few months, as it will need to be considered in the overall balancing of the budget for 21-22, the next financial year. But these flexibilities would allow, if they were granted, and it's a big if they were allowed, allow you to defer that deficit rather than having to cover it in your council tax and budget setting for 21-22. It could be spread over a number of years, and clearly that would change the picture quite markedly. The other big thing which really illustrates the gravity of the position is allowing borrowing for revenue purposes. So direct COVID-related costs, you could borrow, which is a big no-no under current rules. So that's certainly one that would require Treasury approval. So these are in play. They may, in whole or part, be granted, but I don't think at best it'll be anywhere near carte blanche. I think they'll be heavily restricted, and I have little doubt in my own mind that there will still remain a significant residue that needs to be managed by councils. And also, maybe just to round off this point, whatever of those fiscal flexibilities or mitigations might be approved, you are in effect just kicking the can down the road. They are sooner or later going to need to be covered. If I can just move on to a related point in the subsequent para 3246, just picking up on the earlier reference to reserves. So, as I noted earlier, 9.5 million comfortably within our strategy range, a healthy position for normal circumstances, but inevitably is going to come under considerable pressure in current circumstances. And I think a link point is this is not a one-year phenomena, a one-year hit, a one-year pressure. This is going to last to varying degrees, certainly for several years immediately after, but given the overall impact of the actions being taken at a national level, both Scottish Government and UK level, furlough scheme being the obvious and biggest example, will need to be dealt with, and that will mean public finances are going to be in a poor position for probably decades, and over time that will need to be recovered. And in terms of central government support, that inevitably is going to wash through to continuing pressure on our grant position starting for next year. So If I now move on to section 3.3 business grants, maybe just a couple of things to pick out there. The first one, as you may be aware, is the Scottish Government has now decided that they will close on the 10th of July. So it's a fairly short window for remaining applications to get in. But by that time, we estimate in Falkirk we'll have paid out in the order of 25 million to businesses, which is a massive injection into the local economy. And I would just like to pay tribute to the two teams, Paul Ferguson and Rebs and Bens and Pete Reid on the Econ Dev side, in terms of getting these schemes up and running with the rules changing almost minute by minute, getting them into a manageable format and paying that 25 million out well within the time limits provided by the Scottish Government is considerable credit to them, and I think sits comfortably with the impressive action that's been taken by colleagues right across the Council and IJB spectrum of services to our communities. If we move to the last section of the report, which is casting our eyes slightly forward to the medium-term financial plan and the budget for next year, you can see in the first paragraph there in the bar chart the level of deficits. These are pre-COVID, change, and inevitably will head north. They will increase, but the landscape's too uncertain at this time to dwell on that. But they will need reviewed, revised, and I think can only head one way. There's mention of the decision taken at the February budget meeting to progress some form of zero-based budgeting, and corporate management team are on the case and will bring forward, as mandated, to members proposals as to how in practice that may best be taken forward. And apart from the point made about the public finances and in consequence that flushing through to the level of Scottish Government grant likely to be available next year in the current years, paragraph 345 just picks out some context that will feed into, in some shape or form, the budget deliberations. So maybe just in conclusion, a couple of points to make. The first is the sheer scale and uniqueness of the financial challenge that we face. The need flowing from that for a proactive tackling of the challenge. We should, at the very least, identify what we will do to address a significant gap. The timing of when those actions take place needs further consideration. Essentially, what do you do in the current year to get on the front foot, and what do you leave to be picked up in the imminent budget preparation exercise? The point that I've made several times, this is not a 1 year, it goes away. This is a financial pressure that will be with us for the foreseeable future. At that point, I'll stop, convener, and invite any questions and points of clarification that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, and I appreciate that this has been a very difficult financial report to bring forward, because it's difficult for all of us to take in the levels of deficit that has been created throughout all of this COVID situation. But I think what's clear is that the announcements around education and the further additional funding has thrown the figures that we have in front of us into a bit of confusion. We need to get a bit of clarity around those figures, because the information that was based around education was based on the blended learning model. That by no manner of means may still have to be invoked as the 100% return to education, or the full-time return to education, is not entirely certain. It is very much dependent on the continued virus suppression going forward, and there always has to be that contingency. Of course, the additional funding from the consequentials around the Education UK funding is always very welcome. However, we need to have clarity around that, what it can be used for, if there is any caveats in relation to that. There's also a massive amount of work going on through COSLA across parties in engagement with both UK and Scottish Government around the fiscal framework, around the flexibilities that have been proposed, and a lot of those flexibilities have actually come from the local government body themselves as asks, and those are being discussed, particularly around the use of the Public Works Loan Board, the flexibilities, and obviously revenue capital going forward. There's also further conversations with both governments around their particular priorities in the short to medium term, and suggestions have been sought through those discussions about what could be deferred in government's programmes in order to free up additional resources to help support local government. So that there's a huge amount in the mix here. Locally, at the moment, 14 million is a huge gap to have to try and fill. But we know that obviously there's caveats in that right now, and therefore I don't think we are in a position to take any decisions about any further savings at this particular time. As we said, there's work to be done around zero-based budgeting. We need to have engagement with members about the priorities that link to our visions. And I think we need to also have some public engagement about any proposals going forward. So I therefore have a motion that I'm about to ask Jack to share with you. And that is, again, it's to note the financial position for 1920, the initial assessment of the current financial year, recognise the need to take proactive action to manage that, which we have to do in order to safeguard future years. We need to have all services to exercise the financial control, notes the considerations of the medium-term financial plan 21-22 in the budget process, and to note the need for zero-based budgeting type process to be taken forward. In relation to the proposed savings, in light of the announcement on Tuesday and further financial support for councils and more generally the uncertain financial terms, that my suggestion is that the savings should not be taken forward at this time to allow further work to be done on the priorities agreed in the previous item on recovery plans and financial position. An important element of this work is at workshops with members, and we've heard very clearly that members want to be involved in that, and have public engagement strand be taken forward, and that could be in conjunction with our consultation around the vision and the strategic plan. The outcome should be set in a set of proposals for addressing the financial issues and properly informed and understanding the impacts of that on our communities. And I would propose that that outcome be reported back to Council at its September meeting, which I think is at the end of September, to give time for that work to be done. At that point, I'm going to ask whether or not people would want a short time to give this consideration, or to whether there, you would want to make comment at this time.
Yeah, I think we should have a short recess, certainly for the Labour group.
As well as for the Conservative group as well.
I'm happy to do that. Would 15 minutes be?
Aye, that'd be fine.
Yep. Okay. We will come back at, say, 11. People content with that?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right, thank you. Does it come in?
No, not yet.
Okay. Can I have someone to formally second the motion?
I think Paul did. Paul did formally express an interest is perhaps speak later.
Okay. Okay. Is there any? Oh, there's bound to be questions and comments in relation to this report. Councillor Reid.
Just to emphasise, there's not been a coup d'etat, Councillor, because it's still leader. I was going to put forward an amendment, convener, but it was very closely related to your motion, so there'll be no amendment coming forward. We had, however, agreed to scrap the reintroduction of floor bedding for practical reasons, but I think that can wait. The reason we were putting up an amendment, it was basically the same reason as you have outlined in your motion, namely it was premature and we need to look at things overall and certainly do that through members' workshops and public consultation. Just one point of clarification, the reintroduction of pest control, I take it that debate will still go ahead because it's the nature of the scheme rather than whether it comes in or not.
There's a paper that follows this particular item, and a decision would need to be taken on the back of that. There is caveats to allow within this motion for that to be reflected following the outcome of that particular item.
So that will still go ahead.
Yeah.
Right. I think the agreement does reflect a maturity of decision making that seems to have arrived on us during this period. So it's all good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member?
Yeah, convener.
Councillor Alexander.
First of all, I'd like to associate myself with the comments that were made earlier on with the praise for the economic development section and Pete Reid, and for finance in terms of the Paul. They worked extraordinarily hard and they've taken complex issues and made them simple for members to understand. I'm very grateful to them for that. Also, I'd like to just bring to the attention of the committee your own efforts, convener, because I don't think anyone could have worked harder than you have for the last 3 months, and your grasp of complex issues as you credit, and I think we're fortunate to have a leader such with the quality of yourself. I agree very much with Pat, and I hope that this is a long-term change in the demeanour. But I think the general public are looking for maturity from our politicians at all levels. I think the one thing that has come out of this crisis is the need to have all the politicians speaking the same language. You hear the phone's just gone off. Apologies for that.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. What I will say is I'm extremely glad that within the extension of the phases that the hairdressers are going to be opening up, because the grey hair is actually shining through brilliantly right now. Councillor Kerr.
Convener. I think that this is a sensible approach, not knowing what's coming forward from either government is very difficult to make any decision. So I'm glad that this approach has been taken, and our group's glad it's been taken. Can I just, when we were going to talk about the earlier on the papers, Councillor Alexander has already mentioned it, and previous speakers already mentioned it. A lot of our group has worked along with Paul Ferguson and his team for these loans, and there doesn't seem to be any problem when you go to Paul and his team. They have worked tirelessly, and on our behalf, we'd just like to thank them, because personally I've got people that I know who are struggling in a changing environment, changing information coming forward for both government. They adapted to that, and it's really helped a lot of people in Falkirk. It's helped them to survive and their businesses to survive at the moment. So thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. 100% agree with the input from both the environmental, the economic development team and our revenue and benefits. I think they have shown just how easy and quickly silos can be broken down, and that collaborative working can happen. And I have to say that on a higher scale at national level, it's been recognised that we very quickly set up our processes, and others used the template to follow us. So that is a great credit to those involved in delivering that, and 25 million for the size of the authority, such as Falkirk, to be put back into the economy is absolutely fantastic. And I know that they will continue to try and maximise the applications to ensure that fund is exhausted as much as possible going forward. Okay, Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I think it did make sense to pull this item because we didn't have all the details, and things will be fluid and changing. I would also say I'd like to pay tribute to every councillor here. I know everybody has been working hard behind the scenes, as all the officers have. So everybody has been putting in lots of hours every week, reading agendas, papers, inquiries for everybody. So I would just like to pay a personal tribute to all the councillors and to all the officers that have been working hard. But as a backdrop to this crisis, let's not forget that we've faced £150 million worth of cuts for the Scottish Government over 10 years, 76 million to come and 12 million this year. So it's clearly evident that prior to the pandemic, councils were facing serious financial burdens, dipping into reserves, making difficult decisions to cut certain services to make savings, whilst continuing to deliver more priorities from the Scottish Government at the expense of the core budget each year. So as far as I'm concerned, and I look forward to maybe us receiving extra funding through Barnett and then delivered to local councils, it is the duty of the Scottish Government to defend our communities in this time of national crisis. The Scottish Government needs to act now to stop councils, respect the importance of their work, and to ensure they have the funding they need. I think, and I sincerely hope that the Scottish Government recognise, as we have here, the good work that councils across the whole of Scotland have done and stepped up to the plate and implemented what's been necessary to protect the most vulnerable and to keep delivering as many services as we can. And I sincerely hope we get additional funding so that we can fill that black hole and that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. I think it has to be recognised that across all parties there's a recognition that particularly as a result of the pandemic there's going to be financial impacts across government and across spheres of government. No one will be untouched in relation to this, but there's a need to work far more collaboratively across the governments and in spheres of governments to actually resolve these issues and get a trajectory that is going to be able to address the deficits. Unfortunately, the Scottish Government is very constrained with the lack of powers, particularly around the fiscal framework, and until that has been seriously addressed or the funding issues coming from Westminster, then we will continue to see the challenges that are faced. Ultimately, we know that there is one challenge that could actually address this fully and long term, and I have no doubt that will be on the agenda in the shorter to medium term, and looking at the autonomy of Scotland in the future. But I think it's a challenge that we all have to rise up to just now, is to address the impacts of COVID, get into that recovery mode and work collectively to be able to address that, as that is the way that we will be able to achieve the best for our communities going forward. Is there any other?
I'd just like to say that the Scottish Government have had its revenue budget cut by 2%, yet they cut local council budgets by 8%, effectively quadrupling their cut onto councils. Now, for me, that's a political choice. It's not an economic necessity.
Okay, Councillor Alexander.
I'll check some figures. When the SNP took over in 2007, the local government received approximately 1/3 of the budget of Scotland. Nowadays, on this last financial year, when it's just ended, we received 1/3 of the budget of the overall budget for Holyrood. That tells me that there's something wrong with the figures. And when you look at the figures that have been quoted by the Labour Group leader this morning, you find that it hasn't included any additional monies that have come to the authority over the last 10 years. For example, to the education authorities in particular. Also, as he seriously arguing that after the performance on Prime Minister's questions during the week, that he was asked a simple question of will he allow for greater borrowing from the Scottish Government in order to make up deficits, then the answer was a negative. Councillor Bissett seems to have ignored that particular point. So if we want to have a political debate, let's have a political debate, but let's have it on equal terms. I would strongly suggest that now is not the right time for a political debate. Now is the time for people to come together and come to joint solutions. But if it's politics that it wants, we'll match them eyeball to eyeball, toe to toe.
Thank you. I do agree. It's the wrong time to be having political spats, and we've seen that through other organisations who are working far more collectively than ever, with COSLA particularly looking to work across the parties, across the governments and with all local government organisations to get the best possible deal for our public services, and that's not just across Scotland but across the UK, and I think that is the way that we should be going. In Falkirk, we need to look to work to get to the best possible outcome for our communities, and working collectively and across the parties is the way to be able to do that. Any other member? We're happy to agree the motion?
I agree, convener.
Okay, thank you. We move on to item 6, which is the re-establishment of pest control services. Mrs. Geisler.
Thank you, convener. Yes, members will recall that the reintroduction of this service was a matter that was concluded on at the budget meeting earlier in the year. Seems like 100 years ago now. And at that point, I was asked to come back with a report on how that service might be reintroduced. So obviously we've heard from my colleague Mr Smale in relation to the situation that the council faces financially. But the bulk of the report covers, there's a bit of background to this, which members will be aware of. The service that was previously in place and ceased with effect from the end of March 2019. And prior to that, there had been a free service in place and then subsequently a chargeable service. If you see at paragraph 3.3, the majority of the work undertaken by the Pest Control Service prior to its suspension related to calls about wasp bites and the like, and that comprised about 67% of the completed jobs, and that's obviously work that's undertaken primarily in the summer months, ending with it in September. So just to recap, the members approved funding package of £100,000 for the establishment of the service, and we were asked to come back with a number of proposals. Now, there are three options contained in the paper. Option one is really reverting back to the service that was in place prior to its suspension, but you'll see from that I'm of the view that this is not compliant with the Council's concessions policy, and whilst I've articulated it here, it isn't one that I would be suggesting that we take forward. So really I'm directing you to options 2 and 3 in the paper should you be minded to reinstate the service. Option 2 is to provide one free service per household to those who are eligible in terms of our council's, the council's concessions policy, where the household is in receipt of benefits in accordance with that policy. There are obviously downsides to this, and that is that the service may not be able to cope with the demands. However, this is caveated with the point I've already made about the bulk of our work being undertaken in the summer months. There's also a prospect, it's very difficult to determine this with just a reintroduction, but there's also a prospect that there would be little capacity left within the service to provide an offering to other households other than those who are eligible for free service. Option 3, very similar, we're just suggesting that there would be a charge for those who were eligible for the concession, and that would be half the normal amount other than a free service. Other councils, we've had a look at what other councils in the area are doing. Stirling and Clacks have a service that's free to council tenants. West Lothian is similar to the option 3 in the paper, and North Lanarkshire Council, again, they have a free service for their own tenants. Again, as I say, it's quite difficult to anticipate the level of demand. The service that we would be providing with the funding would be 2 officers and associated vehicles and equipment. And so we would be constrained in terms of their capacity, which is where the 1,100 jobs number in both options 2 and 3 come from. Paragraph 4.5 just describes the charges for commercial services if we were to provide these. There's another element that's of relevance here, and that is articulated in paragraph 8 of the report, and that is around successful recruitment of appropriate staff. Obviously, the staff required to have particular qualifications, and if we were to reinstate the service, we would be doing so. We wouldn't be in a position to do so until the 1st of September, given issues around recruitment and the fact that these would be temporary positions. The other thing, of course, we've noted there in terms of risk is that the calculations that we have used relate to the number of households that are currently on benefit, and there is an expectation that that will increase as a consequence of COVID-19. So turning to recommendations, the recommendations I'm bringing to members today is that basically we don't proceed with reintroducing the service at the present time. You've heard, and really the matter just goes on hold in this financial year. That's because of the financial situation that's been outlined by, as I say, by my colleague Mr Smale, and that you've already taken a view on. And furthermore, the challenges that there will be for us in terms of recruitment. And finally, obviously, by the time we were to be in a position to restart the service, the bulk of our period will have passed. However, if members aren't with me on that, then I'm asking you to consider which of the options, either option 2 or option 3, you would wish to pursue. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mrs Geisler. Councillor Gardner, and apologies if I didn't catch you the last time.
No, that's quite okay. I'll wave vigorously the next time. Yes, thank you, Convener, and thank you, Mrs Geisler. She's pretty much covered everything in the report, and I really hope everybody was listening to that, as well as I hope they were listening to Mr Smale previously, who reiterated and showed where we are just now, the unique circumstances and the constant moving picture. There's things within this report that make it plain that we really can't put it in just now. The recommendations speak for themselves, and I fully support what's in the recommendations. If going through the report, which I don't want in any detail, but it highlights the difficulties in putting it in just now. It highlights the time of the year, and it highlights the fact that most of the cases, the vast majority of the cases, have now passed by the time we can implement any service at all. So I do think, in relation to what members were saying in the last item, I think they will take the correct approach with this one and agree with the recommendations, and not cherry pick this one out of the list that were on the previous agenda item and take this one forward. I think we need to wait and see what's ahead of us. There are good private companies out there just now who are doing a sterling job as well. So yeah, we can see how members react, but I'm fully supportive of the recommendations, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, Convener, the pest control. The reality is that to re-establish a section of the department that has been problematic in the past would be disproportionately heavy on the admin side and very light on the service delivery side. It's something that of a history of problems within this section. It was a free service. There was an attempt to place charges on the service a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, just prior to the last elections. They found that was unworkable, it was uncollectible. Vermin don't carry wee labels around their neck saying that where they emanated from. So what we tended to find was that people who had the tidy gardens, the clean bins, and had looked after the general environment were people who were reporting the infestation. So we had a severe problem of dealing with that, because understandably these people were concerned with regards to their own environment, and here it was the local authority pressing them for money in order to deal with a problem that they saw was occurring down the road. Because one thing that is usually quite common, particularly for infestation of rats, mice, whatever, is that they're attracted by food supply, and the food supply tends to come from discarded waste bins. Waste bins that are not even emptied regularly because they haven't been presented properly, and it's involved a whole scheme of involvement of staff and other sections and other departments, as well as environmental health, pest control in the past, and it was found to be unworkable. So with that, Convener, I'd second reluctantly, I'd second the motion to move by yourself on this, because the fact is that it's a service that there's no right answer for, and perhaps and I'm not usually one for going to the market. Perhaps the market's the right place in this particular time. I know that I've been successful in securing work carried out in my area, or our area, Convener, by the private sector at a cost that was going to look significantly less than what we were charging at the time. So there's a whole number of issues which say that we needed to ensure that there's a proper balance. The financial side, Paul's covered, and I think he's covered it very succinctly, as I think messages are now getting through to not just the elected members, but to local authority service users. So with that, I'll happily second the motion. Move on from there.
Thank you, Alexander. Okay, any other member?
I believe Councillor Reid's going to come in.
Councillor Reid?
That comes as a bit of a surprise to me.
Okay.
But I'll come in. Yeah, I think the phrase that's often used these days is unprecedented, and we're living in unprecedented times. And no doubt, like yourselves and other councillors, we've had lots of complaints about rats infestation. I did a bit of swatting up on it, and one of the reasons is because restaurants are closed. The rats don't have the usual feeding place, so that they're moving. And places like Glasgow and Edinburgh are sold out of rat traps and rat mats. So I think because of the unprecedented nature, we should introduce a pest control service. I take the point that by the time it's in, the danger might be past, but at 80 quid a head, which is what they're charging, and in fact they're increasing it because of the demand, it's unfair on those living in poor situations. I think we've got to address that. Wasps, of course, are the big problem. I don't know if we need specialised staff to handle that, because last year I went to 6 houses and did away with wasps by a 79p can out of the DIY shop. So I'm just wondering if there's a happy medium here, and where it's a wasp infestation, we give advice in a 79p can and just tell folks to get on with it. I don't want to make light of it. It's a major problem, especially with rats. But just 2 days ago, I had several complaints from Tamford Hill, for example, where rats are rampant.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Coombs?
Move closer to the router in the hope that I'll get a proper signal. It's just to reiterate what's already been said. I think that all of us have been getting complaints about rats specifically at this time, and I was interested to hear Councillor Reid saying that it's because of their lack of restaurant foods that they're having to come and go into domestic bins. I found that quite interesting. When the rest of us can't get to restaurants either, the rats are having to make their own. But I do think it's important we put it in the budget for a reason, and I think now it's even more imperative that we carry it out and give people a service. And again, what Councillor Alexander said, the same thing. It's the people who have concern for their cleanliness that are reporting the problems. 90% of the time, the cause of the problem isn't where it manifests itself. So I think we really need to do it, and we need to do it quickly. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Bissett?
Thanks, Convener. So we have an amendment. I don't know if somebody's going to put it up or not. But Emergency Executive agrees, 1, to stand by the budget decision in February and reintroduce a pest control service, noting that this will be mainstreamed in the revenue budget. And 2, that option 3 should be, or should, I don't know if Jack's going to put that up or not, but I'm formally moving that.
Jackson, up. I just wanted to clarify with Mrs. Geisler. Well, first of all, I have to say this goes directly against the decisions that we made at the previous item, the principles of that. And it's not to say that we shouldn't go ahead and introduce a pest control service, but I do believe that, as Councillor Garner said, we should actually take that into the round in our decision making as part of our budget review in September. But I just wanted to ask Mrs. Geisler for a bit of clarification around the lead-in time and the ability to be able to get a service up and running, and how long that would then take.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, as is reflected in the report, we, if we were to get a decision today to reinstate, we think it would take us at least until the 1st of September before we could have this service up and running. It's not just associated with recruitment, and we do think there will be challenges associated with recruitment, as we've articulated, but also it's about arrangements for payments to be made and the service to be advertised, etc. So we do see 1st of September as being a reasonable date to be able to do that. Obviously, that leaves us in the lower business months, as I've already suggested. I think to pick up on, if I may, on Councillor Reid's point, we do have quite a lot of information on our website page about self-help in relation to WASP. So I'll check that after the meeting and just make sure that that's sufficiently robust and clear that we can direct people to the website, our website page, if for any other inquiries. Thank you.
Okay, I'm very aware that I may now have muddied the waters slightly from Councillor Garner's proposal that we take the recommendation as in the paper, and I'd indicated that my thoughts were that it should have been, we should be looking to have the issue of the pest control service considered as part of our budget deliberations towards September. So I'll maybe hold back on that at this moment, and that may well be a further amendment that comes forward. But Councillor Nimmo, you wanted to come in?
Thanks, Convener. I just want to take the opportunity to second Councillor Bissett's amendment. I think it is really important because the reason it was included in our budget back at the start of the year was because of the number of complaints receiving from the members of the public regarding the rat situation and the wasps, and that is the reason why I included it in the budget. And it's very important because it's public perception, and they are looking to the council to do something about this. So I think it is very important, and I'm happy to second the amendment as it stands.
Okay. Any other amendment? Councillor Kerr.
Convener. Obviously, if would there be another amendment coming forward if this amendment wins, or because if there's amendment, I would like a short recess to speak to my colleagues how we take this forward.
Okay.
I don't think it needs to be a big recess. Just
10 minutes.
Fine, Convener, with me, aye.
Okay, we come back at 5 to 12. Garner, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I'm happy to go with deferring the pest control to, along with the other ones in the previous agenda item, to the September meeting, this September meeting that's been suggested.
Okay, so you're changing what your recommendation?
Yes.
Councillor Alexander, you were the seconder for that. Are you happy to concur?
Yeah, if that's acceptable to the rest of the committee, yes.
Well, we'll determine that just shortly. Councillor Kerr, you wanted to recess. Have you got anything you wish to add?
No, we had a discussion regarding it, Convener, and we see points from both groups, and we'll vote accordingly.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion from Councillor Garner to defer any decision with regard to pest control and take it in the round of the budget discussions that are required to be had over the next couple of months. and a view to be taken in September. And we have a motion from Councillor Bissett agreeing to option 3 that's been in the papers to be taken forward. We go to the vote, and I'll ask Mr Moody to facilitate.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And just to confirm that we have the motion moved by Councillor Garner, seconded by Councillor Alexander, which is to defer consideration of the item until September in order that it can be considered along with the other budget proposals. And we have as amendment from Councillor Bissett and seconded by Councillor Nimmo to stand by the decision from the council meeting in February and to implement as option 3. So ask Councillor Alexander.
For the motion.
Councillor Alexander.
For the motion. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear him fine and well, Colin.
Councillor Alexander, can you say how you're going to vote?
We can hear him.
I heard them.
I heard them.
I think as I understand
Apologies.
it,
Right, apologies. Right, okay.
For the motion. 4 votes I've got.
so for clarification, recording motion. Councillor Bissett.
Amendment.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Coombs.
Amendment.
Councillor Garner.
For the motion.
Councillor Harris.
For the amendment.
Councillor Kerr.
Could you repeat that, Councillor Kerr?
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
For the motion.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
For the motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Could you confirm that, Councillor Nicholl? We can hear you. Was that the amendment?
Muted. The amendment.
And for the recording, that's for the amendment. Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
And Councillor Reid.
Amendment.
There are 5 votes for the motion, there are 7 votes for the amendment, and the amendment is carried.
Okay, thank you for that. That concludes that particular item. We now move to item 7, which is Children's Services Local Phased Education Delivery Plan COVID-19 recovery. As has already been indicated, that this report has been superseded with the events over the last couple of days, and while the plans, particularly for a blended learning, will have to be held in abeyance as a contingency, we are now looking to take forward a different plan that would enable our children to get back into full-time education. Therefore, I'm going to ask Mr Naylor, who's going to give a verbal report, and I appreciate that this is going to be the first time that members will have heard the proposals as a result of the recent announcements. And again, if there is a requirement for that to be digested, then we can actually have a short break as well in order for that to happen. But I'll ask Mr Naylor to now give us an update on the plans and proposals and to what he is now seeking approval from members to take forward.
Excuse me, sorry, convener.
Yes.
Can I just ask, appreciate obviously this is a very fluid situation and Robert's just about to give us a verbal report. Will we be able to get an email or something so that when we have a recess we've got something to refer to, or do we need to scribble down notes madly as Robert is speaking?
I understand that Robert does have something that is prepared. I'm looking at him to see if he's nodding. No, we don't have anything prepared at this moment. Okay. It may well have to be that we take notes going forward. Councillor Nimmo?
Convener, I'm obviously aware that there was emails issued, I think it was roughly about 10:30 this morning by Robert's office. Now, I haven't had a chance to read them. I'm sure other members haven't had a chance to read them either. They did look quite detailed, so I think it might be worthwhile carrying this item forward so that everybody has plenty of time to read and digest what has been sent out.
I think there may well be a difficulty with doing that, but if we could maybe hear from Mr. Naylor.
So first of all, Councillor Nimmo, what we sent out this morning didn't specifically relate to the return arrangements. It was giving members an update of the current position around free school meals for the summer hub provision, the situation with the water testing in schools, and the communication that we've made with parents following the announcement of the Deputy First Minister the other day. And essentially what that communication with parents says is that it's been stated that there's an intention for schools to return 100% in August, but that we await further clarification and guidance from the government, and similarly that we're awaiting further clarification on the resumption of early years. So I think it's perhaps not particularly necessary that members read through all of that material at the moment, because I intend to cover the aspects that relate to the return of schools just now. So as members will know, in May the government produced its route map with various phases of recovery. Later in May, I think it was the 28th, they published a framework for local recovery plans. We've been working for many weeks now on how that would operate. What the original report that was circulated detailed was all of the various steps and considerations that needed to be taken into account in terms of social distancing, hygiene, cleaning, risk assessments, building preparedness, and so on and so forth. So a fairly significant amount of guidance has been developed. We've worked collaboratively with head teachers and with parent councils and with trade unions on the offer that we were developing for the resumption in August. There's two significant changes to that. First of all, the weekend before last, there were statements made by the Scottish Government about their dissatisfaction with some of the offers that were emerging in some council areas, particularly in Edinburgh, where it was clear that children were perhaps only going to, in the secondary sector, have a very small number of days per week in school. So there was then a lot of discussion about a requirement for a minimum of a 50% offer. What we had arrived at, which we believed that we could deliver safely, based on our assessment of both social distancing, physical capacity, and our assessment of our staff availability, was we had come up with a model whereby we could have 50% of children in the school for 40% of the time. In other words, 50% of primary children in Monday and Tuesday, and the second 50% in school on the Thursday and Friday, with the middle day, the Wednesday, being used for teachers' non-class contact time, preparation for the at-home learning offer, and to allow for a significant clean between different cohorts arriving in school. In secondary, there was a plan for the initial week and then a step-up arrangement towards the September weekend to get increasing numbers of year groups into the school. So all of that was based on our best considerations of the the regulations and the guidance pertaining at the time. What's happened subsequently is that on Tuesday, the Deputy First Minister indicated that there was now an expectation that perhaps social distancing be relaxed in relation to pupils, and that schools should now start to plan for a 100% return in August. To date, that's what I am working with. I have received no formal communication regarding that expectation. What I have is the text of a ministerial statement, and we're working on that basis at the moment. In terms of our ability to deliver on that 100% return, obviously there will need to be further guidance. There will need to be new risk assessments undertaken. We will need clarity on, are there any changed expectations around health guidance and so on and so forth, and I expect that that will be emerging from the government in the coming days. In practical terms, one of the steps that we've taken to be able to facilitate that potentially is we agreed yesterday to offer a further 37 newly qualified teachers temporary contracts to boost our staff numbers for August. And we are also continuing to work on one of the things that was going to be a significant problem in any event, which is the issue of school transport. As things stand, unless or until the restrictions around public transport are changed, our estimate is that we will have 1/4 of the capacity that we normally have to transport children to school. Put simply, that means that we and all other councils would need 4 times as many buses as there are presently. So a 100% return in August remains a significant logistical challenge unless or until some of the other restrictions are changed or removed, in fact. So we've communicated with our school community this change of expectation and advised them that we will update them as soon as we possibly can about what the situation is going to be in August. I'm confident that the arrangements that we had in place for the initial week of term will work and are deliverable. And it would be my view that whilst we aspire to get all children back as soon as possible, my view is that we should probably proceed with the arrangements that we had in place for the first couple of weeks of term. That is because principally, in terms of the educational outcomes and the well-being of children, the arrangement we have in place currently is that primary ones would go in on the first day, that secondary first year would go in on the first day. They would be familiarised with the setup in the school. They would have an opportunity to become clear about the way that the school was going to operate and take part in their initial induction and transition, which obviously has been denied to them in terms of what would have been the normal process. The alternative, which would be for all pupils to be arriving all at the one time, would mean that the situation, particularly for those starting school or those starting secondary school, if I give you an example, and often used one, what would happen in the case of Larbert High would be that we over 2,000 pupils arriving at one time, having not been at school at all for 4 months. So for these new groups, we think that the plan that we had in place is probably the best way to proceed. And I know that discussions are ongoing at national level about what's now being referred to as a soft start. I understand that at the current moment, the COVID Education Recovery Group nationally is meeting and these matters are being discussed. I think the other consideration in terms of all pupils returning in August will be subject to significant commentary from the trade unions. I have already seen something circulated from the EIS that is looking for safeguards, guarantees, reassurances around the social distancing that will apply to teachers and other staff. So whilst it might be a view that there isn't a significant risk to pupils because of their age and because of the scientific evidence in terms of the infection, nevertheless, if children aren't socially restricted, then we need to be clear about whether the social distancing still will apply to staff, and we also need to be clear about the social distancing that's required between staff and pupils. So this is, as has been referred to earlier in different contexts, is a very, very fluid situation. If I could move to early years, there's been significant interest from our communities in terms of what we were intending to do for early years, and it's been quoted that Falkirk Council has abandoned its 1140 hours aspirations. That is 100 miles away from the truth. What we were planning to do in August was, again, following all the social distancing rules and regulations and the focus on the safety and well-being of both the children and the staff, was to have a start which ensured an equitable provision across all of our centres so that all 3- and 4-year-olds received some service. That was similar to the schools model, going to operate on a 2 days, 1 day, 2 days model, where we created what was being referred to as bubbles of 8 children. So the 8 children would have been with a group of 3 staff at all times. Those staff would stay with that bubble of 8 children, and that group would be isolated physically from all the other groups, both in terms of the indoor environment, the outdoor environment, the toileting arrangements, the eating arrangements, and so on and so forth. So we had developed that plan in line with the guidance that we had. What happened yesterday was that the First Minister announced that from the 15th of July, early years settings would be able to be reopened, again subject to the continuing trend downwards in terms of the infection, but she also intimated that they would be opening with restrictions. What that means, we don't yet know. Previously, we had guidance around a maximum of 8 pupils in the so-called bubble. But we don't yet know what the revision in those restrictions will be, and we anticipate hearing about that in the coming days so that we can be clearer about what the operating arrangements will be from the 15th of July. I think it's important for members to know that it has always been our intention that whenever COVID is finished, and whenever there are no restrictions on social distancing, it's always been our intention to resume where we were last year, i.e. in March, where we had a significant number of centres that were already delivering 1140, and we had plans over the course of this summer to undertake building works and changes in the physical estate to enable us to have had 1140 for all children from August. Now, because of COVID, even in settings that were delivering 1140, that could not have been delivered because of the requirement only to have 50% of the children there at the time. So at best, what we could have delivered is half of 1140. So it's our intention, and hopefully this is by October, or maybe it's even earlier than that, that we would resume in over 80% of our establishments the 1140, and that where we can, we would extend the provision in the remaining establishments, which is 9, where works were scheduled to take place over the course of the summer. In some of those instances, the work will require an extended period to be done. So in some of those 9, it will be necessary to wait until next summer for the works to be completed. But we will, for those centres, be looking at maximising our potential to provide places in the private and voluntary sector, and indeed maximising the use of childminders. So what has been quoted that we were moving away from offering 1140 is not the case. I've sent all members an email this morning. I know many of you have been receiving emails from concerned constituents about both of these matters. Many of them have come to Children's Services as well, and essentially there's 2 themes. One is consternation and confusion over the arrangements for the schools restart in August, and the other is around the issue of 1140 hours. So we're collating all the points raised by constituents and parents, and we are preparing 2 responses, one to deal with queries around 1140 and one to deal with queries around the reopening of schools. So the email that I've sent to you all indicates that we will prepare the responses, we will reply to everything that comes either to Children's Services or to yourselves, and it will be along the lines of those 2 themes. Maybe stop at that point and see if there are any questions.
I'm happy to open up for questions, but I do intend to call a recess because I need to take some advice from Mr. Moody, as I think we need to think about how we take all of this forward, because I think there's a lot of information there, but there's a lot of unknowns there before members can actually take a view. So I'm happy that we take questions, but I think we are going to need to take a short recess to look at what how we're going to take this forward. Robert?
Just convener, thanks. There are a number, potentially a number of decisions that will need to be taken. I don't know that they can all be taken necessarily today. And I know that there's a council meeting next week about the arrangements that will cover the arrangements for the summer period. But one of the things that might become a very important decision is the decision that we make around transport. We have a number of routes to school where we contract the bus, and it's a simple, this is a school bus and only school children get on it. But we also have a very significant number of children that are fare payers on routes that travel anyway. Some of those are subsidised by the council so that they run, some are not. But nevertheless, the estimate that I saw only this morning is that the capacity for those fare-paying children to be able to access services is likely to be 0. And we may need to make a decision that only distance entitled children have access to transport. So those that currently use buses that are not distance entitled but pay a fare, we may need to take a decision that they can't get on a bus and pay a fare and go to school, and that would be several hundred children. The other thing that around transport that we need to be mindful of is if the current restrictions remain in place, and I mentioned earlier that we would be at quarter capacity. What we had hoped, or what we were working on for the summer, was if we were intending to have 50% of children going to school, we thought through a variety of means we might be able to come up with alternatives to get half the children there at a time. If we've to get 100% of children there at a time, then personally I can't see how that can be done. And I think the other thing that may be a decision that potentially could be taken today is for us to decide that the what I referred to as a soft start, in other words, the arrangements for the 12th and 13th of August could be agreed with the specific undertaking that if the country is moving to 100%, that we will do so as quickly as possible thereafter. Thanks, Convener.
I think that there's a number of imponderables there, and I think members do need time for consideration. Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. Absolutely, there's a lot of imponderables, and obviously it is a fluid situation. I was wondering, as Robert touched on there, about could we get clarification from Mr. Moody as to whether or not this item, because it is so important, could be moved, and that we can find out all the information we need to know between now and next week. Now, I appreciate that the agenda has already been issued for the full council meeting, but you know, it is, as we've said 100 times, a situation that we've never come across before. Is there a mechanism within the council to allow us to add that to the agenda for next week? And the second question is, are we likely to have the information that we need? I was aware that Robert said that as yet he still doesn't have any formal communication from the Scottish Government regarding the statements made this week. So will he have the information he needs to allow us to have the information that we need? And can we then have that chat next week, or do we need to have a special full council? Because obviously, again, as Robert has alluded to, there is significant implications on this for all the parents out there, both you know, throughout the school estate from early years forward. So it is something that we do need to get right, and we can't without the proper information. So Colin and Robert.
And that's exactly the conversation that I've been having with Mr. Moody around potential continuation of this and use the full council next week or a special meeting of the emergency executive after full council next week, if that's what's required in order to actually get some of the decisions made. But I'll bring Mr. Moody in.
Yes, thank you, Convener. There are a number of routes that would allow members to continue consideration of this to next week. So it could either be a special meeting of this body called at the same day as the council. It could be this meeting, in fact, continued into that date as well, with this item continued to that continued meeting. Or there is a potential to refer the matter to council. But I suppose the body that has started thinking about it is this body. So I think that would be the starting point, is continuation to the emergency executive and a meeting taking place, or this meeting being continued until next week. So yes is the short answer. Consideration can be moved forward.
Councillor Nimmo.
I think bearing in mind what we've just heard, it was a very detailed update from the director. I would be happy to support moving this on till next week so that members have got sight of all the information available and are able to digest it before taking any sort of decision. So I'd be quite happy for this to be continued to a date next week. Thanks, Convener.
Councillor Harris.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I would concur what Alan said, and I think, as Colin pointed out, that this is probably the correct body to deal with the matter. Pre-COVID, it would have been the educational exec that would have had responsibility for this. And I think with the smaller body, I think we have a more succinct discussion over what are some very complex matters. So I would support the continuation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I would agree with that as well. I think if Mr. Naylor produces some form of report, we can then share that with our group as well for wider discussion and bring it back to this executive for agreement or disagreement, whatever. So I definitely agree with moving it on. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it would need to be caveated. I'm not entirely sure that Mr. Naylor would have 100% all the information that's required, but it may well be a phased approach in that there's decisions that we could be taking that allows things to move forward with other guidance coming in due course, and we can look at how that can be there'll be mechanisms where we can make those decisions that are required to be made over the summer period for the schools to get back accordingly. And I would hope that we'd be able to have something that could be shared in writing with members in time for any emergency executive beforehand. Councillor Colley.
Thank you. I just actually wanted to ask a quick question around Robert had mentioned about the soft start and whether and about making a decision on that. Is that okay in terms of timing for yourself and the team in terms of planning to defer that for another week? And it was just a general question.
Yeah, I mean, the position at the moment is that we've told parents everything that we know. So they were receiving communications this week on an individualised basis about what day their child was to come to school and what would be the pattern of their attendance as per the plan that we had put in place. So parents have that information, but they also now know that there's been a change in terms of the national expectation. So they will be mightily confused because we've told them that your child's to come on the 12th and this is what will happen that week and the next week and the following weeks. So for example, I was speaking to some colleagues in municipal building yesterday who were talking about their childcare arrangements, and one was telling me that she had been sharing childcare with her next door neighbour. They'd both got their letters. One was going to be in Monday, Tuesday, and the other child next door was going to be in Thursday, Friday. So there's a lot of angst in the system. So what we've now told parents is that there's now a national expectation for everybody to be back.
2.5 hours. Are we having a break?
For everybody to be back. And we've told them that we will tell them more as soon as we can. So specifically about waiting another week, we've already told them that we will tell them as soon as we can. The issue of what I've described as a soft start is, I think, and this is maybe something that members can reflect upon today, is just your own view of having not been in school for 4 months. What are your thoughts about the prospect of everybody going back on day one, given the emotional change and tribulation that there have been for all of those children?
Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor McHugh, and then I'll get to the others' hands just shortly.
Thanks, Convener. Certainly the announcement 2 days ago has thrown everybody up in the air, although the good thing is we're getting on, we're ahead of the curve. We can't forget that we're beating COVID-19 we're taking the responsible actions that we've had to take. And if the Scottish Government have moved to get our kids back to school, then they're obviously taking that and all the science that goes with it into consideration. First off, I'd like to say that Robert and his team and head teachers and staff throughout our council have been working really hard to bring this plan together. And at this moment in time, I think a lot of them are thinking, oh, that work shelved. But the situation is that we may have to refer back to that plan due to children going back to school, and we have to wait and see if there is going to be a spike. We're looking right around Europe, obviously, at the different reactions that they're doing, the different plans that they're putting in place and the reaction to those plans, and we will be looking very closely, obviously, at that. So I do acknowledge the hard work and the big decisions that need to be made, and obviously our children need to be the centre of all those decisions. I think we have spoken to Robert quite a bit about the soft start, about our children. Totally agree with Robert that, you know, our children, whether we had COVID in the mix or not, our children have been out of school will be out of school for well over 4 months, and formal teaching will have become quite alien to them. So I think that if possible, a soft start would be the best idea, just to allow children to familiarise themselves with the school establishment again. There is so much information as we set up this emergency exec. That's exactly what it is, an emergency exec. There is so much information changing daily, and obviously Scottish Government down to us are trying our best to take what information that is coming and do our best for everyone. I welcome the fact that if we can get our children back into schools safely, then our parents and carers can get back into their line of work as well. I think our economy is taking a huge hit as well, and obviously our government has to bring all that into a picture, but in the same time taking safe decisions. So in that respect, that I understand that there's a lot of information came forward today, and that we need to digest that information, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that there's been a lot of work put in place prior to the announcement the other day, and there has been a crazy amount of work going in since that announcement, and we welcome the fact as soon as we get firm information from the Scottish Government that we'll be moving forward with. And I totally agree that if we can move this to next week when we've got fuller information, then that's acceptable.
I think we don't have enough information to be able to take a view today on any of this. Okay, I've got Councillor Reid, Councillor Alexander, and then Councillor Kerr. And if there's anybody I've missed, I'll come back to that in due course.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be very brief. I think it's undeniable that we need a continuation because several questions have entered my mind just in the last few minutes. But as a helpful, I hope, suggestion, would it be helpful if we were to frame these questions in writing to Robert and circulate it to each other as well, so that he's not caught in a hop when we next meet, but knows in fact where our questions lie.
I think that's a sensible suggestion, Councillor Reid. I also think that if there's a briefing paper or something that could formally come forward to members, some of those questions could be answered in that and shared. Councillor Alexander?
Convener, all three groups seem to be in agreement. I think we should move on. We're going to have a debate today. We should be having next week.
And we are in danger of getting into that when we don't have enough information to make decisions. You're absolutely right. Councillor Kerr?
Convener, obviously I agree with everybody else, and Councillor Alexander's right, and he's going round and round and round. But if we don't have all the information next week, if Mr Naylor doesn't have the information, one of the items on next week's agenda as decision makings during the recess, if there is a recess. So we'll need to be very vigilant of what, if we can't get all the information, who then addresses the questions that's no answer going forward. So it's a massive issue, and something that the whole of Scotland and the whole of Falkirk parents will be looking at. Thank you.
And indeed, Mr Moody will be looking at that in close conjunction with Mr Naylor around what decisions might have to be taken during the summer period, and to how best we can facilitate that. And that will feed into the discussion around the decision-making structures going forward. Is it Councillor Coombs?
Thanks, convener. I appreciate you letting me back in. I should have actually come back in at first when I asked the question. Can I formally move then? I know Colin said that there was a mechanism for doing this. Can I formally move that we take this decision? I know Robert said that we could have debated today about everybody back on day one, but given that it's only next week, if we can do it next week, I would rather do it in the round when we've got all the information that we require, assuming that Robert has the information to give us. So again, to avoid going round the houses, if that's what's needed, I'll formally move that as a motion.
Yeah. And I think that was a discussion that Colin and I were having, is about whether or not we needed to have something in writing to actually move to continuation. But I think if there's an agreement across the board, that we're able to accept that verbally.
Agree.
Yeah.
And I think decide the date.
I think Paul wants to come in. Yes.
The date of the continuation will be agreed once we know that we've got information to be able to share with members, because there's no point in calling a meeting if we don't have the information. Paul?
Thank you, Convener, and thanks for Dana for spotting me waving. It was to touch on Councillor Reid's good idea that we all sort of coordinate our questions to put to the director, and I think just for the thoughts of people, would we just put that through Adana as education spokesperson, through yourself as convener, so we're not duplicating and hitting Robert with a lot of questions that can maybe be answered easily by Adana or yourself. I think that would be, if we've got one place to put all our questions to, I think that would be a good idea.
We'll discuss that with Mr Naylor, how best to coordinate that, Councillor Garner, and to ensure, exactly as you say, there's not duplication, but there's perhaps a mailbox that could be used for people to send their questions to, that can get then picked up by the relevant officers, and that can get put together in order to get responses. Councillor Nimmo, I think we're in danger of starting to debate procedural aspects here.
It's just a quick point, convener. I mean, a lot of the questions that we're going to be putting will depend on whether or not the national guidance changes between now and then. So I'll be wary about the type of questions that are being asked, because in a lot of cases we probably won't be able to get answers for them.
Well, I think if people have got questions, whether or not they're able to be answered locally, they should still be put, because I know that there is regular dialogue between services and civil servants, and that can get fed into that wider context as well. There's a paper coming to leaders from COSLA on Friday that we're hoping may well have a bit more information, a bit more clarity. It's not been received yet, because obviously they are having to react to the announcements as well. But I firmly hope that there'll be information will be disseminated over the next few days that will start to help and support services, education services, and their deliberations in getting the children back to school, as we've been asked to do. Okay, Mr Naylor?
Thanks, convener. Just one small thing that I omitted to mention. because of the earlier announcement that the school return date across Scotland was going to be from the 11th of August, what that meant was that we needed to find a week to give teachers back by way of holidays. So it's just to let members know that the way that term dates are agreed upon in Forth Valley is that we seek to align with both Clackmannanshire and Stirling. So only this morning did we get confirmation from our own trade unions that we will go with the same arrangement as Clacks and Stirling, and that is that we will have 2 weeks in October, which is in line with an earlier report that the Children and Young People Committee agreed for the year after next. So the existing October week will have 1 week beyond that, which will now be school holiday. So we've sent that communication out to our head teachers and parent councils today, because we felt it was important for families and parents to be able to start planning potentially to get a holiday at some point this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're going to continue this item possibly to next week, but it will be dependent on the information that Mr Naylor has. We will get a report of some sort for members to consider, and we'll be able to give further thought to the mechanism by which we're going to work with to get all our kids back to school. And our nursery classes at a future date, which won't be too far away once we have more information and more clarity. And everybody's in agreement?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. I'm aware that we started early at 10 o'clock and we always anticipated this would be a long meeting. However, and I know that people will be starting to get hungry, but Patricia Cassidy, the Chief Officer of the IGIB, has another meeting at 1:30. So I'm going to propose that we take the item on the Integrated Joint Board next, and then we could stop for a lunch break. People content with that?
Fine,
okay,
no problem.
Okay, we'll move to item 10 and the Integrated Joint Board report. Patricia?
Apologies, technical difficulties tabbing between my phone and the computer. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you for agreeing to take my item. I'm very mindful of the time you've been on the call. What you have in front of you is a report which includes 2 reports which were considered and agreed by Falkirk Integration Joint Board at their meeting on the 19th of June. And there are 2 papers. The first is the Remobilise, Recover and Redesign report, and the second is a summary of all of the activity in care homes over the last 12 weeks. Also, as part of the paper, there is a presentation which we were able to give in a briefing session yesterday for elected members, and that's a summary of some of the key data and information in relation to, among other things, local deaths in Falkirk, requirements around adult support and protection, some of the information about shielding and other data. So the Integration Joint Board considered the reports and approved the recommendations in the Remobilise, Recover and Redesign. That report is in the context of the IGB's strategic plan, the Council's plan and national guidance, and it follows the 4 phases of the framework that Scottish Government announced 2 weeks ago, and we're now into some element of phase 3 of that plan. The We've done a review of our strategic plan, and the results of that review are that our strategic plan is still very much current. The learning that we've taken from COVID may allow us to, for example, accelerate some of the transformation that we were already planning. One of the key elements was approved by the board, and that was extending. We've been able to deploy geriatricians within the community, which has supported our hospital at home service, as well as preventing admissions to the acute hospital, and for the first time has supported direct admissions into the community hospital. And that's been a key development, and we've now got agreement to extend that, but also to continue with our whole system review to look at the community bed base, both in community hospitals, but also in care and residential homes. And that brings me on to the care home report. I know a lot of you have been making inquiries, and we've provided a couple of briefings, but we thought it'd be helpful for you to see this summary report, which just outlines some of the activity and our response to some of the incidents in homes, but in overall ensuring that we have good care assurance and regular monitoring of the care homes. The partnership set up early in March. We set up a mobilisation control centre, and as part of that we were collecting daily information from the care homes about staffing levels, any symptoms, any illness or death, as well as looking at quality and care assurance. This was augmented following Scottish Government guidance, and it became supported by Public Health. We have daily assurance meetings of that group with Public Health and the Care Inspectorate, and we review every single care home every single day, and they're given a rating on a red, amber and green status in relation to the level of risk and concern that we have. And we introduced an additional level, which is the purple level, which is a cumulative score across all of the different elements of the RAG rating. The model that we developed has been used as an exemplar nationally and was given out as part of the guidance to other partnerships and health board areas in relation to the set-up of care home assurance and monitoring. The most recent guidance from Government has required us to set up, in addition, a professional oversight board, which includes the Director of Nursing, Director of Public Health, Medical Director, Chief Social Work Officer, and the IGB Chief Officers, and that is up and running locally as well. There's quite a lot of information in the report. I hope you find it helpful to get that update, and I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And I'm also aware that this was the subject of a discussion, a briefing session yesterday for members to ask questions. But I'm going to ask Councillor Cawley.
Thank you, and I also wanted to say thank you to Patricia for that briefing yesterday. I thought it was very helpful, and the members who attended were very engaged and some really good and helpful questions and discussion. I just want to say a couple of things, because I know we're really short of time. I think some of the content of the report, some of it makes really difficult reading, and I think I suppose from the start we should really say that each and every one of us thinks about the people who've lost their lives to this virus, and our thoughts to their and condolences to their families and friends. It's no doubt a very difficult time, and it's quite stark written down on paper. As noted, the papers have already been considered by the IGB and setting out the challenges and the plans for recovery. The partnership is still in response mode, but planning needs to go forward, looking at what the opportunities are for greater partnership and building on what has been learned to help chart the way forward. I think it's a couple of decisions made, which Patricia mentioned, around the enhanced community team and the geriatricians within that, and the opening of Thornton Gardens and enhancing it with additional respite support for unpaid carers. We know that there's been significant challenges for unpaid carers at home, and it's great to see the partnership being able to respond to that. I also want to, and I've said it in all forums, and I'm going to continue to do it, to record our thanks to the staff across the partnership in social care and health and in the third and independent sector. all of them have gone above and beyond over this period. And I'd also like to mention the community volunteers when we look at the shielding, the number of people we are shielding in this area. And they've been absolutely integral to providing that practical support alongside the support, the staff who've ably supported people through the support for people line. And I noted quite a lot of you made messages through the Carer Centre during Carers Week in support of unpaid carers. So I think we should mention the extreme pressure that families have been under, and the work to support them through the partnership has been excellent. There's clearly been huge challenges, not least in our care homes, and there's been a huge amount of partnership working to respond to that, and I think it's important to say that Falkirk has responded very quickly. The staff have across the partnership have come in to support care homes and also to put in place the systems to be able to identify where issues arise. And I think, you know, to put on record in this meeting our thanks to Patricia as the Chief Officer and our team. And I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Fiona, and I would associate myself with all of the comments that you've made in relation to the service and the delivery of the response around COVID, and the fact that they have gone above and beyond, and they have become very personally involved in making sure that we have to continue to deliver the best possible high quality service that we can during this time, and having been supported by volunteers and indeed those that have volunteered from other parts of the service as well. It's very heartening to see that the work recognised nationally as well, with the good practice that's happened, and what we've got before us today is part of that good practice, and the model of care that was very quickly developed and is shown to be very positive. And I'm more than happy to support the continuation of that and going forward. And as a council, wearing my other hat as council leader as opposed to member of the IGIB, as I've already supported that. So I think more power to Patricia and her team, and going forward there's a great opportunity to redesign services that are going to be much more meaningful to our service users going forward, and that is a legacy that we need to take from our lessons learned from COVID. And I absolutely concur with your thoughts around those that have sadly passed away. Every death is a tragedy, and that means our family is going to be left hurting, and all we can do is continue to support them and have the understanding of what they've gone through, particularly at this time. So I'm happy to second the report. I am aware that there was a briefing session yesterday, but if there's any particular questions or comments, Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. Likewise, I'd like to associate myself with Fiona's comments. It's when you see statistics on paper, it's very stark, and each death is indeed a tragedy, and let's hope we can push this virus back and lessen the amount of deaths and finally get them down to zero. But I would just like to say that was a really insightful briefing yesterday from Patricia, and as usual, you know, a quality presentation and very concise and detailed answers. And I think everybody got a lot out of it. And I don't think there's anybody that would say, you know, that everybody has basically chipped in at this time of crisis and united to try and move us forward. And you could go on forever thanking everybody, but you know, I think it's really been really important to see the sort of everybody coming together, and kind of everybody for all walks of life doing what the little bit they can to help their neighbour or whatever. And I'd just like to personally say my thanks to everybody that's contributed in some way. And I don't have any particular questions. I think that they were all answered yesterday, as I said, very concisely. Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Convener. Be very brief, but I echo exactly what you said and what Fiona has said and what Robert has said. I thank Patricia for the briefing yesterday. It was, as Robert said, that the usual quality performance and everything that we asked about was answered. I think it is a tribute to the everybody working within the partnership, that despite, as Patricia said yesterday, significant numbers of our staff being shielding themselves or out of the front line or working from home, that in fact they have delivered an excellent service to all the people within Falkirk area. So just thank them all. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Anyone else? Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Patricia. Okay, I'm going to call a break for lunch. I'm aware that some people may need to go out and get something for lunch, so I'm going to start the bidding at 45 minutes, coming back at 1:45.
Agree.
Is it a real lunch or a virtual lunch?
Depends if you're watching your waist. Depends if you're watching your waistline.
Okay, we'll come back at 1:45.
Right, see you up in the canteen.
On record. We are on item 8, Connected Falkirk, and I'll go to Mr. Naylor.
Thank you, Convener. Sorry, I was on mute. As members will recall, we had a report on Connected Falkirk at the Emergency Executive on the 14th of May. And since that time, officers have been working to establish the best way to procure two things. One, the devices that will give a device to every child in primary 6 and 7 and every secondary child, and also provide devices on a ratio of 1:5 for the primary 1 to primary 5 year groups. What's happened in the intervening period is it's become clear that the plan to refresh Wi-Fi is going to have to be accelerated because the Wi-Fi that is currently in our schools has reached end of life. And the other thing that's emerged is that, having explored a variety of options, including leasing of the equipment, that the best value that can be negotiated with a reduction of £2 million in the overall cost, the best deal that can be done is to actually purchase the devices. What that means is that there's a requirement for there to be more capital at the front of the programme rather than it being spread across a number of years. So I would refer you in the report to the table at 4.5, which has in it the original profile of the capital spend and then a reprofile. So essentially what members are being asked today is to agree to the reprofiling. The money, as you know, the 9.6 million total had already been agreed at the council budget. There was then the decision on the 14th of May to make the first 3.6 of that available to get the project up and running. But the request today is to agree to the reprofiling of the capital. And you can see there that significantly that is now in year 1, and the following years are lesser amounts. The importance of this decision, in light of our earlier discussions, can't be overstated, really. Irrespective of whether we have a blended learning model in August or not, it's imperative that we have this project moving forward, because it's going to provide much needed additional support to all of our learners, and as we consider the deficit to learning that there's been, then if we can have this rollout completed as soon as possible, then it provides an excellent opportunity for us to be addressing that loss in learning and assisting with catch-up and recovery plans for individual pupils and cohorts. The other thing I would draw your attention to is that in our exploration of this option, there are some revenue budget implications, and they're set out in paragraph 4.7. But to address these, we have some commentary in 4.8 as to how those revenue costs will be addressed over the course of the 5-year project. So essentially what I'm asking members is if they'll agree to the reprofiling, that will enable us to proceed with the timeline that's set out in paragraph 4.10, and you'll see there that we would intend to have these devices with children as early as we possibly can. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions that members have.
Okay, thank you, Mr Naylor. Councillor McHugh.
I'm happy to move this report. Asked Robert to go away and get on with procurement on the 14th of May, and he's came back with this proposal. I agree with the recommendations. I think that it's absolutely imperative, as I echo Robert, we need to ensure equal access to technology for all our children. There is going to be children that have fallen behind. It's important that we have everything and they have everything at their hand to catch up and to improve their chances in the future. So I'd just like to move this report.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. You're absolutely right that this was originally agreed pre-COVID by way of a programme, and we did ask for more work to be done to go away to look at how this is going to be procured, and we recognised that there was a real urgency to move the digital agenda forward. I'm pleased that there is being given some prognosis to what's been asked with regard to pressures on the revenue budget, and there's been the ability to look to offset the pressures related to that would enable us to go forward. I think the whole challenges around homeschooling as part of COVID has been a challenge, and we want to ensure that our most detached and most digitally isolated of children are able to be given as much of an opportunity to have equity with the rest of their peers as possible, and this is one way of doing that and making no difference so that everybody has the same access. So while we're being asked to front load this programme, we had agreed to the programme. It does mean that there's higher costs associated with the revenue of the borrowing at the beginning of the programme, but there is the ability there to offset that going forward. So I'm happy to second the report. Open it up to members now. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. But we were happy to allocate this funding in February at the budget, as we saw it as a fantastic transformational education project that will give our children every chance to succeed today, excel tomorrow. As far as we were concerned, 9.6 million could have been allocated in February to move things forward. So I don't have any issue reprofiling it and get things moving. I think it's the right thing to do, especially as we're trying to get kids connected digitally, and it would have helped if we had done it last year, for example, but here we are. So I think this crisis has shown us that we need other options as well. So I think getting the Wi-Fi sorted out to start with is a way. So don't have a problem reprofiling this at all, and Naylor if he's confident that we'll make these savings. Thank you.
Mr Naylor?
Yes, as in other discussions, there are significant challenges around savings, but we will be looking across the piece to make sure that we've, within the context of the overall children's services budget, able to identify those costs for each of the years to make this happen.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. The Conservative group recognises the challenges and changes that happen frequently, and this is one that we're quite happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I've got Councillor Nimrod and Councillor Coombs.
This is even more important in the wake of COVID. And going back to the budget in February, the Labour group saw the value in this project in the long term. We don't have a problem with the reprofiling of the money. I think that's worth support, but I don't have a problem with that at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, convener. Excuse me, sorry. I don't have a speech to make around. It's just a question, and I was trying to find it here, juggling different devices. I'm sure I read somewhere that the Scottish Government were also providing cash to get pupils online and more electronic devices, but I can't see where I read that. I wonder if Robert knows and if that will have any impact on our plans, or are they just taking the lead from Falkirk Council? My tongue's in my cheek while I'm saying that, by the way. I don't want a political fight. You can't see me. I'm laughing.
I think maybe Mr Ritchie might be able to answer that because is devices coming by another route?
Convener, there are a number of work streams where we're receiving devices. So as Robert referred to earlier, there's a work stream where devices are coming through monies from the Scottish Government. There's also a work stream called Connected Scotland, where there are a number of devices being provided to local authorities for those who are digitally excluded. So these devices are going to people, for example, who are shielding at the moment and unable to connect digitally. They're going to some citizens who have been referred to through Barnados. So from that work stream, we're hoping to get somewhere in the region of at least 250 devices that we can use. And of course, we've gone back and asked the government for more than our share if that's available to us.
Thanks for that. But when will we know what, if any, funding we're getting that would help with the Connected Falkirk programme, or have we basically alienated ourselves from that because we already had it in the budget? I was also surprised to see that Perth and Kinross are doing a lot of the same work but getting it through a charity.
I'll bring Mr Neal and then Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener. The Connected Scotland fund that Stuart referred to, my understanding is that that's 100 million for Scotland. I think COSLA are still discussing what the distribution method is for that. Stuart and colleagues have already identified those in the categories that he mentioned that are digitally excluded in terms of older people and families. But the contribution that we hope might be made to Connected Falkirk is some sort of balancing figure once the needs around the specificity of that allocation is made, because it's undoubtedly the case that many of our children are similarly digitally excluded and vulnerable. So therefore, it would be appropriate for some of that funding to go towards a contribution to this project, as these children will be receiving devices from within the project. So that's what we're hoping, but we're not at the stage yet where we've got detail of either the allocation, and as Stuart said, we've asked the government for more.
Okay, Councillor McHugh.
Just leading on from what Robert said there, I believe that the government money is also to ensure that there is Wi-Fi improvement in certain areas. Obviously, that'll help all families and all our residents throughout where there is problems with Wi-Fi and internet, and there's purchases of dongles and various things where we can get children and families connected that are having problems.
Councillor Gardner.
Thanks, Convener. There's obviously a lot of talk about Wi-Fi here, and Councillor McHugh touched on it there, and it's the broadband coverage around the area, and the fact that dongles are going to be required. There's obviously a rollout of upgraded 4G and 5G going on in the area now, and I'm sure that'll help a lot of the areas that we know outlying especially get connected, and that's obviously a huge Scottish Government programme that's in place just now. So hopefully that will help all the people that do require to be connected, and makes it far fairer around the area.
Okay, there is no one otherwise minded. Everybody seems to be content and supporting the report. Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you, folks. And move on to item 9, and it's the Falkirk Council recovery, and it's going to be the Chief Executive is going to take this report.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is simply to provide an overview of the Council's approach to recovery planning. And as agreed at the Emergency Executive on the 11th of June, recovery planning sits alongside our approach to the financial plan. It needs to be absolutely tied into our broader approach and strategy for the Council over the coming period. So in that context, each of the services has been preparing its recovery plan to resume service delivery, ensuring that's aligned with priorities, ensuring it is about the best use of resources, and also reflecting the learning that's come from the lockdown period in terms of some of the changes which we've made during that period, which we can then take forward into what we might call the new normal, be that about digital or working with communities, use of buildings, etc. So in the appendix to the report, there's an overarching summary of recovery themes linked into the priorities statement you saw earlier, and then outline proposals, summaries in relation to corporate and housing services, development services, and indeed children's services, though clearly, as we discussed earlier, in relation to children's services, matters are somewhat in flux at the moment, and no doubt that will change in relation to the further discussions we'll be having about children's services and education specifically next week. As you would anticipate, there are a number of themes that are common across all the plans, issues around about health and safety of our customers, members and staff, the whole issue about moving to a new norm of greater home working and the use of digital technology, centrality of undertaking appropriate risk assessments as we move forward with our proposals for returning to service delivery. And really the aim is to get services up and running to the public in that context of the new normal, efficiently, effectively, and as promptly as we can. The recommendations today are for the Emergency Executive to endorse the approach to recovery planning, and to note that updates will be reported at future meetings as we take this work further forward. And myself and my colleague directors will be happy to answer questions in relation to the report and the appendices attached. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth, and my thanks to the service directors and their teams for pulling all of this together and taking cognizance of the challenges before us, but also the lessons learned as a result of the lockdown. And this will help to shape what kind of council we are going forward as well, and will have to be aligned at some point with our vision statement. However, the priority is to have a plan to get services back up to being deliverable to the public, to have full services deliverable to the public. And that may well be that they are delivered in a slightly different way or in a different format than perhaps they have been, and that is then linked to other parts of work within the council, particularly around the SPR, etc. But these will be dynamic documents, and this is a starting point, and these will change as things evolve in going forward. And this is designed to give members an overview of each of the services, of where they are and what the short to medium term proposals are. And it gives us a start to have those conversations, particularly with staff, as we look to come out of lockdown and get back to full service delivery. Because I think it's important that staff are taken with us on this journey, and indeed are part of shaping the services going forward. So as a starting point, I'm happy to propose that we endorse the first iteration of the recovery plans. There will be further iterations coming forward to members, and you will also see the further work linked with other aspects, whether it be through the vision, the development, the corporate plan, and indeed our medium-term financial planning and our SPR going forward. I'll open it up to members. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I think the Labour Group would agree with the recommendations as well. It's just a first report really, and it'll be developed. But I just wanted to ask, on page 70, point 1, service delivery, it says opening hours for frontline service delivery is likely to be reduced. I wonder if maybe Stuart could expand on that a bit. It's an important statement. It's a wee bit ambiguous. It concerns me a wee bit, so I just wondered if you maybe expand on that.
Okay, I don't know whether Stuart, do you want to take that, or Kenneth? Stuart?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up. I think what we're attempting to say here is that as we move out of lockdown, that will be on a gradual basis. So if you think about our hubs, for example, we'll probably open our hubs on the basis that in the first instance we'll do this by appointment. So that will mean that our hubs will be open for less time, not open to general kind of walk-in public, but open just for the purposes of appointments that have been made in advance. As I say, that's part of the kind of route map as we go through a recovery and get to phase 4, where we're looking at some version of normality.
Okay, thanks, Convener.
Okay, any other member? Councillor Kerr?
Thanks, Convener. At the start, there has been a lot of discussion over the last week regarding how we take the council forward as a group, and there will be disagreements, and there will be conversations had with different groups. but the main thing is getting it right for the people of Falkirk. And if this is the start of it, the Conservative group is in support of it. Convener, thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further questions or comments? Okay, are we happy to endorse?
Agreed.
Thank you. Brings us to the final item, which is item 11, is Falkirk Community Trust Recovery Plan. And again, Kenneth's going to speak to the report, although we do have Maureen Campbell for any questions, etc. Kenneth?
Yes, thank you, Convener. So this report sets out the Falkirk Community Trust's proposed approach to recovery. As you said, Maureen's on the call, and her report is attached as an appendix to my own report. I mean, really, in introducing this issue, there's perhaps just two items that I want to touch on. The first one, which is a central feature of the report, is the phasing of reopening and the trust proposals for each stage. And of course, all of that is in the context of a number of principles in relation to the same issues that we'd consider as a council. Issues around about health and safety. For the trust, it's about supporting health and fitness in communities. Issues around finance and the capacity to generate income. And I suppose as we move towards phase 3 of the route map, this is where we begin to see that there will be real opportunities to reopen facilities. So I think not all aspects of that are clear in terms of guidance at this stage. So the central part of the report is looking at the facilities that will open at that phase 3 stage, and summarised in paragraph 3.7. So a relatively limited return to services, which is proposed, but ensuring a geographical spread. And some of the operational requirements that sit alongside that in terms of the limitations of service delivery at this stage are set out in the following paragraphs in respect to both leisure facilities and libraries. So that's the direction of travel and the specific proposals in relation to facilities. I mean, the other element of the report that is worth drawing attention to undoubtedly is about the issues around about the potential loss of income and the job retention scheme, the furlough scheme. So looking back to the financial overview report that we considered earlier on the agenda, that identified a potential figure of 3.2 million for 2020-21 as a potential full year effect of loss of income from the trust. Now, at this stage, of course, a significant proportion of trust staff are furloughed, and a total of 1.1 million has been claimed for the period March to May under the job retention scheme. However, as members will be aware, the proposal is that the furlough scheme will end in October of this year. And even though it may be by then very possible for a majority of facilities to open up, dependent on where we are with issues around about social distancing requirements and indeed public sentiment about indoor exercise and gyms, etc., there is likely to be very substantial impact on income receipts. So the income receipts, which the trust has been growing its income receipts over a number of years, but the ability to replicate that in the current year, even after we emerge from lockdown, I think is very limited. I think it's important that we're simply aware of the financial risks round about that, and clearly further decisions beyond what is set out in the current report about the reopening of additional facilities needs to be taken in that context. And given the potential financial consequences, it's clear that the council needs to be closely engaged with all of that work because of that potentially very significant impact. And that really leads into the recommendations which are in the covering report. The first of which is asking the Emergency Committee to endorse the proposed approach to reopening culture and sport facilities and services as outlined. But the second is asking the committee to note the information in relation to financial implications, and that further reports will be presented should any decision be required on funding in relation to the trust. So these are the two recommendations, and happy to take any questions. I'm sure, as you say, Maureen will assist with more trust-specific aspects.
Thank you, Kenneth. Yeah, the trust is in quite a difficult position as part of the COVID and the recovery, and even phase 3 may well come along that allows elements to be reopened. There's aspects that are going to be more challenging around the trust, and until some of that is clearer, it's going to be difficult to make decisions around that. The Trust Board have met, I understand, and they've agreed the approach that's here today around the phased reopening, and I would encourage members to support that approach and allow some businesses or business aspects of the trust to start to operate, as well as leisure and fitness facilities to be able to be opened up as with the government guidance. There's going to be obviously aspects of the trust will need to be taken in and discussed further around the strategic property review, and of course the budget process itself. We'll need to take cognizance of where the trust is at that particular time, and where furlough has perhaps at that point ended as well. So there's a lot of variables still in there that's going to have to be considered in the wider context, and none more so than when we actually start to go out to our communities around SPR and the budget process. That all have to come into the mix around the trust going forward. So I would encourage members to endorse the proposed approach to sport and culture and the phased reopening, and indeed be able to note the financial implications, and that be taken into account through Council's deliberations in collaboration with the Trust going forward. I'm happy to open up now to Councillor Garner.
Yes, before I formally second, Convener, I just have a question for Moni. It's one that I'm not too sure about. Are gyms and sports halls classified as the same during, through the guidance, or is there differences of what we can and what we can't do?
Maureen?
Yep, I'll switch my camera off because it seems easier to hear me when I've got the camera switched off. We're still seeking clarification on that. The definition of gyms is quite clearly around the health and fitness sector. The issue with sports halls is about contact sport and what can you use a sports hall for. The thinking at the moment is that you could use a sports hall for activity that doesn't involve any contact with anyone else, where you can keep people in a 3 metre square on their own. So that's something that's still being worked on. Clarification coming.
Right, there's not many sports that can do that, unfortunately. Yeah, happy to formally second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garner. Okay, I'll open it up to members. Councillor Alexander.
Councillor Garner's obviously never seen the space that's awarded to centre forwards at Westfield for the opposition, but never mind. The whole issue of the trust, the trust is going to get it hard. We knew it when it was the whole situation came to a head a few months back. There's no economies of scale that we may be able to get from Falkirk Councils own departments. So we knew that it was going to be very difficult for the trust. But I think the recovery plan is as good as we're going to get at this point in time, and we hope that it will evolve to a more inclusive, a more decisive report, a programme rather than report, because it's important that well, now that I think we're beginning to appreciate the halls, the sports complexes and the services that they offer. I think we've seen when they're taken away, just exactly what the impact it actually is. So I think that I welcome the report. We hope that we can turn it around and bring back. I think some of the business that we've lost, and some of the attractions that we have are important, and but we need to sell them. We need to sell them in a major way.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Colley, and I think Councillor Coombs, right? Councillor Colley first, and then Councillor Coombs.
It's just a quick question for Maureen around the job retention scheme, and I suppose about planning around the staffing. With the job retention scheme percentage reducing, am I right in thinking that employees may be able to work some hours for the trust and still be able to receive some furlough pay, or are we in a position where we have to pay additional top-ups to that?
Thanks, Councillor Colley. The job retention scheme extension from the 1st of July does allow for part-time working and part-time furlough. That's obviously something that we'll need to look at, given the fact that the majority of our workforce are part-time workers anyway. How we bring them back to work and in what form is something that we're certainly looking at the moment. We're in a very fortunate position that through the council's support, our employees are receiving 100% of their normal pay. That's not common across all of the trusts in Scotland. And so I think giving consideration to what are we able to pay going forward is something that I'm sure we'll want to have a conversation about going forward. But at this moment in time, you can take advantage of the furlough scheme on a part-time basis, and that's certainly something we'll give consideration to.
Okay.
Thanks, Maureen.
Okay, Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, convener. First of all, I'd just like to put on record my thanks to the trust staff and the trust board who have been, there's been a lot of communications obviously over this time from Maureen and her staff about what's going on, and I also would like to say that the implications of the services that the trust provides, and I'm sure I've said this before, but sometimes the trust are seen as the poor relation when we come to budget times, as to the fact that it's not seen as, it isn't statutory services, and we understand that. But I think we also need to understand, and it's been highlighted more throughout this crisis, that the physical and mental aspect that the trust services, both from cultural and the sports side of things, it's extremely important to our residents. And I think that when we do start talking about budgets again, we need to be aware of how important it is, and hopefully that will be taken at a national level as well, and there may well be more funding available. So that was really all. The other thing I was going to say was just a little shout out for the tennis courts at Grangemouth and Dollar Park that are available free if anybody wants to get their racket out. Since we've missed Wimbledon, you know, we are close to Andy Murray. We could be down there practicing our skills. That was all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Joan. I'll see you in your wee white skirt. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks very much, convener. I agree with the recommendations as well, and I think, as Councillor Alexander said, it's not until it's gone that you kind of miss it, all the open spaces and the cafes and the gyms, etc. And maybe people will appreciate it a wee bit more once it all comes back to life and starts to open again. And I just wondered if a question I'd like to ask is, will there be some consideration to putting prices up? And I'm a bit concerned that it might be job losses, but I'll leave it at that. But I just want to, it's a wee bit remiss of me that I didn't say at the very beginning that I'd like to welcome Councillor Kerr to the executive in his new role as leader of the Conservatives, and I hope he's up for the challenges that lie ahead. Thank you.
And you're absolutely right, Robert. We should have welcomed Councillor Kerr in his new role as group leader to his first emergency executive. And you will be facing a fair bit of challenges, I think, going forward, as we all will. Councillor Harris.
Thanks, Convener. Just a specific question to Maureen, really. Or comment, first of all, good to see that the Grangemouth golf course is open. I wouldn't be surprised if it's absolutely mobbed, because practically every other golf course and when they opened up was mobbed. However, can I just ask, I don't see any reference to the ski centre reopening, because again, that's an outdoor activity that can be practiced at social distancing. Is there any information regarding the ski centre?
Maureen?
Yep, the ski centre is certainly an area that we think is coming into being accessible in the next, probably in phase 3, we think will be covered in terms of the ski centre. We're working with Snow Sport Scotland just to look at the safe guidance. The issue at the ski centre is not so much about being outdoors, it's the fact that you have to handle the lift to get back up. So everyone has to touch that lift in order to get back up the slope. So we need to think about the cleaning arrangements for that. Obviously, the ski club are keen to get back in. There's a big financial issue that we need to take account of in terms of the business case. So in the note that I've attached, we've said we need to look at the financial costs of opening each of our sites in terms of what that will do to the rest of the financial year. So certainly we're keen to look at all sites, but at this point in time, we don't have a date for opening the ski centre. But we do have a discussion with Snow Sport Scotland about safe operating arrangements along with the other dry ski slopes in Scotland.
Thanks for that, Maureen. Thank you.
Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. It was interesting just listening to the Chief Exec's introduction and other members' comments, especially around the financial situation involved with the Trust. Because I have serious concerns regarding the financial viability of the Trust post-COVID, and perhaps this is maybe an ideal opportunity to look at alternatives to the Trust and how we actually manage our facilities in the future. Thanks.
I think that there needs to be broad consideration around the budget about a number of things, and I think we don't want to, at this stage, start to set rumours going about the Trust. But I think that discussions need to be had with Maureen and the board around what is going to be able to be delivered by the Trust in the future, and that's not a criticism, that's because of where we are post-COVID, and look at where there's best value, but best value doesn't always just revolve around money, as Councillor Coombs has said. There's a big health and wellbeing agenda out there, and that is going to be for members to take cognizance of when they make decisions around the budget. Okay, if everybody is content, we're happy to agree the report. Yeah?
Agreed.
Okay, that brings us to the end of a very long emergency executive. So I thank everybody for their time. Oh, sorry, Councillor Garner.
Just quickly, can I ask the members who are coming to the climate emergency meeting next, are we still all keen to go? And I'm wondering if Councillor Munro will be participating within that group.
I haven't heard anything to the contrary from Lynn.
Neither have I. Neither have I.
Yeah.
Maybe officers have heard from Lynn if she's not able to make it. but we'll pick that up at the next meetings. I think that's 3 o'clock, if I remember correctly. But thank you everybody for your time and patience today. It was a long agenda, but a lot of very important stuff going forward, setting the direction to get the council on the right trajectory going forward. We will obviously have to consider around education next week once we've got more details, and that will be information will be sent out to members as quickly as we can get that. Councillor Coombs.
Sorry, just a quick question regarding our next meeting at 3 o'clock. I've only got from 3 till 4. Are we doing a